Today I'll be looking at whether a $1.4 million portfolio at age 61 can support a $10,000 a month retirement lifestyle. You know, I've helped a lot of clients create sustainable retirement plans over the years, and I've developed a very specific set of criteria that the plans have to meet to determine whether various savings amounts can realistically support different spending levels throughout retirement. And that's exactly why I'm making this video today, to show you whether a $1.4 million portfolio at age 61 is truly enough to spend $10,000 a month in retirement. So let's get right into it. So a gentleman recently came to me. He is aged 61 and he has roughly $1.4 million in investable assets. He's got some emergency savings and he is retired now. And the big question is, can I spend $10,000 a month safely in retirement? Now, he's not getting Social Security yet, of course, because he's only age 61. If he waits to full retirement age, his baseline Social Security is roughly $3,600 a month. He's got no pension, no rentals, and no annuities. So, other than Social Security, he's going to be relying on taking from his portfolio to make up the difference. And, especially in the beginning before Social Security, that's kind of a fair amount of money to be taking from a $1.4 million portfolio. The other big thing is he wants to make sure that his money lasts at least until age 95. And the big reason that he's come to me, he's been online, he watches YouTube, and he's gone to these free calculators online that will show you what your retirement spending can be. I think he used like NerdWallet, and then I know he used Fidelity because he sent me a screenshot of what that looked like for him. And so he's gotten various answers from these different online calculators, and I think that's actually kind of made the problem worse for him because it kind of increases his uncertainty about it. Here's the retirement calculator from Fidelity, and it doesn't really ask a lot of questions. It's just like, when do you want withdrawals to start? What age? How much is your savings? What's your Social Security? And then it's like, boom, here's an answer. And it's telling him that he could spend about $8,300 a month. And, he thinks he needs to spend more, and he actually wants to spend more, though he does have some discretion in parts of his budget. The problem with using a calculator like this is, think about it. There's no ability to adjust for inflation. I know they use some baseline there, but you can't separate out, for example, regular spending and healthcare inflation, which tends to actually be a lot higher than general expenses. There's no ability to input what account type. It's just like, how much is your savings? But depending on whether that's all in a 401k or whether that's in a Roth or a regular taxable account, that would make a massive difference on the outcome. So it's not even asking that question. There's no ability for advanced tax planning strategies. Like I said, there's nothing about healthcare spending. And what about long-term care? No ability to do that. So in essence, it's really just a black box. You could even see down, if you scroll down on the screenshot, it says, the results are based on an underperforming market. What does that mean? It doesn't tell you what that underperforming market means, so you have no ability to control that. And so this has caused a big problem for him because he can't confidently determine if his savings is enough to actually sustain his lifestyle through retirement. Now, if you feel like you're in a very similar situation to the client that I'm talking about in this video, where you don't know how much you can spend in the moment, head down to the description of the video where you can answer a few questions and receive a personalized video with retirement advice specific to your situation. And now that you've seen how this was impacting the client, the next piece is specifically important because I'm going to cover exactly how we navigated this situation to figure out if he can truly spend $10,000 a month. Big areas of our focus are going to be, what's the current portfolio allocation? And does the asset location make sense given your needs? And what I mean by asset location is you have different account types. And so are the assets that are in those accounts actually working towards your goals? Are they tax efficient for your goals too? And we're going to look at that specifically to see if we can just shift assets to different accounts and make any difference there. We need to consider the correct withdrawal sequence. He actually has a taxable brokerage account. He's got a Roth IRA and he's got an IRA, and there's various amounts in there. We want to figure out what account makes sense to start drawing from first, second, and then third. I mean, maybe you even withdraw from them equally or in a pro rata basis. So we want to look at that and see if it makes sense and see if it makes a difference on his overall retirement picture. We're going to add in the current and anticipated healthcare costs. We're going to bake in long-term care. He doesn't have any type of long-term care policy, so we're going to have to add in some expenses for that. Nowadays, I'm using about $75,000 a year for 2 years, which is like statistically, that's kind of what you would expect for an average lifespan. We're going to look at, can we improve the tax situation, right? Is he subject to net investment income tax? Is he subject to IRMA for Medicare premiums? How can we lower that, all else equal, and improve his situation? And then we talked about longevity, something an online calculator doesn't really care that much about. We know what the life expectancy tables are at Social Security and other online databases for insurers, but that's an average, right? We want to know, does he have any health issues right now? Has he had cancer? Has he had heart disease or anything like that? And then what's his family history like? Because those are going to determine how long do we really want to plan for. Well, it turns out that there are a couple people that live quite a long time in his immediate family. So we are going to push his end of plan age out to age 95. So that means he needs to have his assets last about 34 years. And then also legacy. Is he charitably inclined? Does he want to leave a legacy for family? Now, he has a son, but the son does fairly well for himself, and he feels like he wants his needs to be met first, and if there's anything left over for his son, great. So our baseline is going to be that, okay, if in inflation-adjusted dollars, he can leave $500,000 to his son, that would be great. But that's not going to be the determining factor of our plan. That's going to be kind of a secondary goal. Now, if you look at the baseline of his plan here, it's not great. You've got the 35% Monte Carlo. And if you've watched my channel before, you know I'm not super keen on Monte Carlo. But generally, that's not a great situation. And so we're going to see how we can improve it, because in this case, in most situations, he runs out of money early. And so we need to figure out how we can make his money last longer, but still get him the money that he needs to live off of. So the first thing we're going to do, and I think I forgot to mention that a second ago, we're going to focus on Social Security optimization, also something that you can't do in one of those calculators. So the baseline was we expected him to take Social Security at 67. That's when he was roughly going to get about $3,600 a month. And what we did, we played with various ages to determine, well, can we make his money last longer? And the answer was yes, we can. If he waits till age 70, that's going to drop nearly $300,000 to the bottom line of his average ending value for his assets. And it's going to expand the number of years that his assets last by 3 years. So that's great. So we're getting a lot closer to our end goal. But what else can we do? So now I'm going to turn the attention to his portfolio. Earlier, I talked about asset location and asset allocation. And so we're going to see if we can improve the way that he's invested and squeeze some extra juice out of his retirement plan. And when I looked at his portfolio, I think the answer is definitively yes. So the first thing is asset location. We want to make sure that the assets he puts in each of the various accounts are going to account for, his overall asset allocation goal, but they're also going to maximize growth and tax efficiency by where they are placed. And if I look at his portfolio, it turns out there's plenty of ways that we can improve that already. So I'm looking here at what he's got, and he's got about $195,000 in his Roth IRA. And he's got this Prime Cap Odyssey Aggressive Growth Fund in there, ARK Innovation ETF. Not a great investment, but those two at least make sense in the Roth. They're primed for growth. And then he's got these like Global X Super Dividend ETF and another covered call ETF based on the NASDAQ. And then there's this Elevation Cloth, I don't even know how to pronounce it, hedged equity ETF. Overall, not a great allocation for the Roth, especially those income-oriented ones, the covered call and the dividend. Generally, you want to have more growth in your Roth because that's going to be the last bucket that you generally withdraw from. And when we kind of optimized for withdrawal sequence, we found that was the best sequence too. And so we're going to have to redo the allocation of his Roth and place better assets in there, in addition to just getting rid of some of these silly investments that don't make sense. And I'll get to that in a second. Now, his IRA, he's got, a little more than $1 million in that. He's got like semiconductor index, that same Prime Odyssey Aggressive Growth Fund, those two income funds that I just mentioned. Then there's like a mortgage REIT thing, some kind of closed-end fund. And then he's got a couple of these hedged equity ETFs. He's got the same cloth one, and then he's got some Swan hedged equity ETF in there as well. Overall, this is probably a better asset location than what he had in the Roth. He does have this geared towards income, but I think we can do a better job with the assets in this account, especially just getting rid of some of these ones that don't really make any sense. And then also shifting more income. He still probably doesn't have enough income in here as compared to what we want for our overall goals. Last, he's got about $227,000 just sitting in cash at the bank, uninvested, not efficient. And so we're also going to invest that appropriately. So now I'm going to take you through his asset allocation. And this matters because we want to make sure his overall allocation, and roughly what that means is how much stock versus bonds do you have in your portfolio? And that kind of means, how aggressive to conservative are you? And is that really going to meet his overall goals? He's in a situation where he needs to kind of draw a lot of income, especially before Social Security, but he can't be too conservative because he needs his money to last quite a long time. So that's not an easy problem to solve for. If you look at his current allocation here, he's got roughly 60% US stocks, 17% international, and then you've got this other, and then pretty much cash. If we include the cash in there as bonds, he's roughly an 80% stock investor and then 20% bonds. To me, that's a bit too aggressive given his current needs, because the risk that he's going to run into is if he waits to 70 to take Social Security, he's drawn a lot from his portfolio. This kind of allocation could be down probably about 45% if we go through some other type of financial crisis. That means he might risk just blowing up his entire retirement plan. So we want to put measures in place so that doesn't happen. If I look at his overall sector allocation, one thing I noticed that really jumps out, he's got 36% of his stocks in technology. Now, look, technology has grown and grown over the years, so it is a larger percentage of the total market portfolio, but it's not 36%. So that's another area that we need to reduce because technology stocks are really expensive. And if we go through a major crisis, those are probably going to get hit the worst. And, he can't be in that situation. So we have to tone that down too. Now, something important here I want to focus on is the expense ratio. He's got a lot of these funds, and the truth is they're quite expensive. If you look down the list, that Prime Cap Odyssey is like 0.66%. You can invest in the Vanguard Growth ETF. I think it's like 0.03 or 0.04% a year. I can almost guarantee you it has outperformed this Prime Cap. ARK Innovation ETF, 0.75%. It's had a terrible performance over time. It is definitely not earned its fees. But even more scary is you look at this, cloth hedged equity ETF, 2.59% expense ratio. Saba closed-end funds, 5.8%. And then you've got the Swan hedged equity ETF, 0.88%. Also really expensive. I want to take a second and just mention these hedged equity investments. The financial services industry loves to push these. They love to push all kinds of products that talk about managing risk, and they're almost always way too expensive, and they never really deliver on what they're supposed to deliver. And these two are just prime examples of that. So generally the pitch is, hey, we'll reduce risk for you. And sure, yeah, you'll have to, take a little bit less upside, but we're going to reduce risk for you. And so that's going to be worth the trade-off. In reality, it's almost never worth the trade-off. And what really ends up happening is they will reduce risk. So let's say that the stock market falls by 10%, okay? Well, maybe one of these hedged equity ETFs only falls by, 8% instead. So that's less than the full 10%. But almost always what happens when the market rises by 10%, well, they might only rise by 5.5 or 6.5%. And when you look at it, especially for this cloth one, that's exactly what has happened. So the question you need to always ask yourself if you want to reduce risk is, you should just say, well, okay, would I just not be better off selling a little bit of stock and having more cash? And usually that's the correct answer, because these things almost always fail. Now, to be fair, the Swan Hedged Equity one was roughly equivalent. It was about 56% upside and 56% downside capture. But again, like, it didn't actually improve your situation. You want to see a gap between, you want more upside and less downside. So it really doesn't make any sense to have it in the portfolio, because once again, for that portion, just own more cash. You don't need to own that fund. And I hate to pick on them, but it's just the reality. So there's so much that we can actually improve by his portfolio. One is getting rid of stupid investments that actually don't diversify it. And then two, we're going to really cut down on the expense ratio. I'll put this chart here, and then, what I charted for him, I think is a better path, is a 60% stock, 40% bond type allocation. And but look at this chart. So Joe's portfolio is on the left, and then I benchmarked against Vanguard Balanced Index Fund, which is also like a 60% stock, 40% bondish type allocation. And look, Joe's portfolio had less return. See the arithmetic mean, that just means how much did it return on average in a year, about 4.9%. Vanguard had 5.8%. The biggest difference is the costs associated there. So it loses on that front, but did it actually do a better job on the downside? Maybe there was a good risk-adjusted return. The answer is no. Look at where I highlighted maximum drawdown. Joe's portfolio over this time period was down 22.5%. Vanguard was only down 20%. I don't want to get too into these silly advanced stats, but if you look right below the maximum drawdown, there's something called alpha. That's measuring on a risk-adjusted basis. If we equalize risk, what was your return? And you want to see a positive alpha number. Well, Joe's portfolio is negative. So that means he's losing compared to Vanguard on a risk-adjusted basis. And we kind of already saw that already. You got all these other kind of risk-adjusted stats. I don't want to focus on that, but go down to where I circled in red the upside and downside capture, what I was talking about a second ago. He captured 89% of the upside, but 94% of the downside. So just a stupid allocation, right? We can do much better than this. The portfolio I want to give him is going to capture, probably roughly equivalent to the upside and less downside. And that's what you want to see. And that's how you get better returns over time. Something else I did for him, and you look at this chart in here, and again, like, you look at the downside and look at where Joe's at. He's in the blue. He did much worse than Vanguard. And so we want to make sure his returns are smoothed out. We care about sequence of return risk, and we want to be able to build a portfolio that hopefully, if we do get into a major global financial crisis, he's going to be able to weather that storm from our investments and from some of the other strategies that we are going to follow. And so just by making these improvements to his portfolio, dropping the expense ratio to less than 0.2%, and I did have to leave there are some income investments and some other things that do cost a little more than Vanguard. But look, we lopped off more than 1%. That drops right to his bottom line. And this is going to improve his situation drastically. We also put the assets in the right place. By efficiently placing assets, it's also going to improve his returns over time. Third, we're going to have a bucket strategy where he has at least 1 year of expenses in T-bills. That'll be in his taxable account. Then we're going to have another 4 years or so in the IRA of income-oriented investments. This way, we've got about 5 years worth of money that we can draw down on before we have to go to the long-term growth-oriented stocks and have to start drawing from there. So hopefully, by using a bucket strategy in conjunction with just a better investment strategy, that's going to help him weather any type of storm. So look, already just from improving his Social Security by optimizing it, waiting till he gets to age 70, and then improving his investment portfolio, he's in a much, much better place. You can see his average ending portfolio value is now about 1.8 million. Monte Carlo has jumped up there close to 80%. I feel way better about this plan. But we still haven't solved for what is his really safe retirement paycheck. right? Because there are still plenty of situations where you could run out of money if he just kind of statically takes 10 grand every month. And so now we want to jump over to Income Lab. We're going to put all of the same data in Income Lab, and then we're going to see what it tells us. And then we're going to look to see if we can make further improvements to kind of raise his retirement paycheck up even higher. So yeah, I mean, first things first, it's pretty good, right? His retirement paycheck, while less than 10 grand a month, is getting pretty close. You got close to $9,300 a month. And we know we've got these retirement guardrails that I talk a lot about. And so he knows, hey, now, okay, if I start out at 9,300, if things keep improving, I could actually take more money. And we also have a very strict threshold where if my portfolio does get hit, I'm going to have to cut back. And Joe does have discretion in his budget, and that is realistic. And hopefully with the things we've done with his portfolio, hopefully it won't go below that, basically $1 million threshold there. But the question still remains, can he do even better? Could we give him more income? And we haven't really done any of the advanced tax planning or withdrawal sequence. So now we want to jump over and see what it looks like if we do that. So we can go to our tax lab and we can have our software iterate all these different withdrawal sequences. You can see taxable, tax deferred, tax-free, or maybe taxable, tax-free, tax-deferred. And in conjunction with that, we'll look at, okay, doing Roth conversions systematically, especially for required minimum distribution age. At what level does that improve our situation? And so what you find out is that actually his situation, if he does the Roth conversions at the 24% tax bracket, he can actually increase his retirement paycheck and get pretty close to the number that he wants to get to. The catch is that he's going to have to accept a lower net ending legacy for his son. But he's okay with that because that's a secondary concern, and he's totally fine with that. Because you guys always have to remember, anytime you do a retirement plan, there's always the trade-off between income and how much you consume and spend and ending legacy. And generally you can't have both, it's one or the other. He wants to have a higher retirement paycheck. And so by doing the 24% Roth conversion systematically, he's going to save $513,000 in net taxes, and that drops to his bottom line. It increases how much he can take every month. Now he can take pretty close to that $10,000 number. You've got $9,930 retirement paycheck. We've helped improve his retirement guardrails as well. And so this ends up being a great solution for him. So now he has certainty around how much he can spend, and he also knows how much he's going to have to cut back if things don't go well. So he's committed to this retirement guardrail strategy. We've accounted for healthcare and long-term care spending, and we've optimized his Social Security tax plan. This is something he wasn't getting from, the Fidelity and NerdWallet calculators. So now that you see how to evaluate if a $1.4 million portfolio can support a $10,000 a month retirement spending plan, you can hopefully make more informed decisions about your retirement plan going forward. And if you want personalized advice to your exact situation, I put together an entirely free retirement questionnaire that'll help you get personalized insights about your retirement readiness. It walks you through the exact process I use with clients, and at the end of it, you'll receive a video from me walking you through the steps that I take towards planning your successful retirement. To take it, just click the link in the description to get started. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.